Okay.
We've got someone on the Nice.
Okay. So welcome everybody, and good morning, good evening, wherever you are, because I see quite the diversity over here. I am very excited to welcome Anina and Rachel today, who will be talking about remote careers for designers and recruiters. My name is Lakshmi, and I'm an ambassador here at Power to Fly. So I will be turning it over to them to talk about who they are, their philosophy, and what they will be teaching us today. But before I do that, I want to go through some housekeeping items. This may be familiar to a lot of you that have attended previous events, but for those who are new, we would love for you to participate. And you can participate by either putting things in chat, or if you want to come off mute or video. I have to enable you to come off mute or on video. So please drop me a DM or in the chat if you want to come off. Just remember that this is recorded, which means if you come off mute or on video, you will become part of the recording. So if you prefer to remain completely anonymous, then just DM, and then you can either DM Kelly or myself, and we'll make sure we get the question over to the panel. And then you will get a copy of the recording a few days after. But if you're super excited and you want to watch it, pretty quickly, you can go to YouTube where this will be available. And remember to subscribe, because then you'll have access to all of our events. Also follow us on social media. So YouTube, we're on Facebook, Instagram. So now what I will do is I will turn it over to beginning with Anina. Anina, if you can let us know who you are and give us a little bit of background.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Lakshmi. Thank you, Lakshmi Butterfly, for having us here from Allora Collective. So, I'm Anina. I'm a remote design coach at Allora. I really focus on coaching clients that's really moving into UX, junior designers that's starting to get into the industry, looking for jobs, and overall working remotely. I am still a designer and I work remotely. Currently, I'm in Georgia, in Batumi. I'm actually born and raised South African, so I've been traveling around a little bit, even under circumstances, to really pursue the remote work. And that's exactly why we're here today as well. Besides, coaching designers and actually doing the design work for international companies, I've been in the industry for almost 10 years. So I've worked across agency life, startup life, corporate life. I've been been there all, I've seen it all. And I've great experience that I wanted to share with everyone that needs that assistant in getting into design and getting into the remote work in these different areas as well. So I of course love a passion for design and coaching and helping people, but I also find part of that remote work and the design life is really also having a good habits and productive methods to help you work remotely, because we know it's much different than sitting in the office and working remotely. So I focus a lot on building habits, on building routines, making sure that you still grow in your career and not just stay busy without actually progressing. So I live for freedom, and I live for that kind of balance between work and life, all in one place. So today I'm very excited to talk about design and recruiting with Rachel and having Lakshmi here. So we're glad to help you. There's a lot of questions that came through, so we're excited for that. And of course, when there's sessions in the live call today, that would also be amazing. So over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Anina. Thanks, Lakshmi, as well for hosting today, because we've done a couple of events with Power to Fly. It's the first one with you, so it always feels quite great experience to work with the team at Power to Fly. So really enjoy that actually. So quick introduction about myself. I'm originally from France, lived in the UK a big part of my life. And studied abroad when I was a student, which is probably how I started enjoying working, studying at the time, sort of traveling across different countries. Then I had the chance to relocate to Hong Kong. That was my first time working in a different country. Now I'm in Bangkok, in Thailand. So as quite similar to Anina, actually, I've worked on the agency side in recruitment. I've worked on the corporate side, so working for quite big international companies, helping candidates relocate, helping candidates interview well, prepare well for their interviews. Obviously, that was in my interest as a recruiter. Across all types of roles, mostly sort of corporate, finance, HR, marketing, all of that. And these last couple of months, I've actually been a freelance, remote recruiter. So, getting the experience of working with clients, finding clients in different countries, obviously working remotely, managing my own time, getting sort of that different exposure, actually, because how you position yourself as a remote worker, being independent or self-employed, whatever it is actually very different from being employed. You have to set your own boundaries. As Anina said, you also have to, plan your day. It's, and what I've realized now is really, it's not like my work plans my day. I plan my day depending on what I want to do and how, when I want to work, and how long I want to work as well. So setting my own hours and getting flexibility for doing other things that I'd like to do. So I think it's great today. There's definitely, or surprisingly, quite a few synergies between recruiters, designers, in terms of how the day-to-day is set up, but also how you go about finding job opportunities. So really looking forward to answering all the questions that were actually asked today.
By echoing what Eri is saying, you're both very inspiring. So, and we're really excited to have you. I'll begin with the first question, which is, how does one break into a design or recruiting role, and what skills and experience do you need to have on your resume? And as you're answering that, I wonder if you could also touch upon not just people who are starting out perhaps, but people who might want to make that career pivot. So I can begin with either one of you. I'll go alphabetically. Anina, if you can.
I think that's a brilliant question, and of course, approach it from the design perspective. As a designer, I would definitely say, let's start with your skills, right? In design, there is your hard skills and there's your soft skills. And if you start looking at your hard skills, things that you need to start improving and learning and know the basic about is visual communication, interaction design, information architecture, wireframing, prototyping, user research, analytical skills, and critical thinking. So all these things sounds a lot, but a UX designer is very versatile. You work across a lot of different dimensions. So it's very important that you start learning the basics about UX design and about visual design. And then, of course, some of the soft skills is a lot related to your personality type. I've heard this at various designers that if you have the N in the Myers-Briggs personality type, that's already a great start. That means intuition, right? And you're going to use a lot of intuition as well, because that's how you come up with the future ideas of UX. But besides the soft skills, in these hardcore skills, things that you can start doing in terms of experience, because I find breaking into UX is kind of hard if you don't have anything to show for it, right? This is all this catch-22 is like, oh, work for us, but where's your experience, right? And you're like, well, I just started. So a lot of tips I give to my students, to my clients, is that you can really start by building your own portfolio without having clients. You can really start looking at the websites or apps that you like using, or even ones that's really bad and you kind of feel frustrated and you want to improve that. And if you have the basic knowledge of UX design, you can implement that process on improving an existing product, right? Of course, in the interview, we'll say, this is just a hypothetical project that I've done, but it's to showcase your thinking, right? In design, it's all about communicating your rationale, making sure that you have evidence-based research, and having a really good case study to present to a potential company. So having a portfolio is essential to start looking for jobs, and having a case study shouldn't block you because you haven't had clients before. There's a lot of products out there on the internet that will allow you to, or the opportunity to just create a case study and start practicing that, because I think that sometimes is the hardest part, is just to get started, right? You have the knowledge, if you've learned all the basics, now it's just actually implementing it into a project. So that would be for what I will say is the core of UX design, is having some of those hard skills, of course, right? And having soft skills, which I've mentioned earlier with your personality type, and then as well, start by implementing it, right? Actually taking those skills that you have and showcasing them through a case study. Yeah, that's kind of my advice in terms of design. Rachel, do you want to continue from a recruiter perspective?
Yeah, and just to back up from what you were saying, Anina, about, you have to find a way to start getting that experience. It's always that vicious circle. If you want to break into design or recruiting, as we're talking about today, how do you start if you don't have that experience? And I think that's really sort of I think that's a great question, because it's, really finding your way, building up your knowledge and your skill set around that. I think in recruitment specifically, if you've never done recruitment before, starting as a sourcer is a good starting point. The sourcer is just to, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that, so I'll explain what it is. A sourcer is someone who is responsible for that first part of the process, which is really, finding candidates, doing that research piece. It can also include approaching candidates on LinkedIn, but it sort of stops to the point that you don't have conversations with candidates. But starting as a sourcer is a good way to sort of get your head around what recruitment is, working and shadowing a recruiter, someone who handles the end-to-end process, and who will speak to the candidates, because by shadowing this person, you would have done research for a role. Let's say you're looking to fill a marketing manager role, and you're the sourcer. You have to find these profiles on LinkedIn. You're partnering with a recruiter, someone who gives you direction, who explains which companies to look at, what are the size, scales of companies, regions, experience required, and that person sort of guides you through that process. But you can also shadow and listen to those interviews, those candidate calls that the recruiter will be doing. Progressively, you get to understand, what are the best types of questions to ask, how an interview is structured. So, yeah, I think, and a sourcing role is really, I guess, I would say, as I said, probably the best place, the way you can actually start getting your skills. Because sometimes, starting working as a recruiter, if you've never had a call with a candidate before, you may sort of panic and say, what do I say? What do I not say? Because also the questions of, what you should not ask is also quite important. So I think that will sort of progressively build up your skill sets. So, talking about skills and experience that you need to have, good communication skills, you need to ask questions, you need to be curious, you want to sort of find out more. And these are things that are not always, you don't always have these skills from, the get-go, from the first day, but being able to build progressively on that. But I would say, being curious, asking questions, I think that is probably the main piece, because if you shadow a recruiter, that person will also see that you have these questions that you want to know and find out more about your role as well. So, yeah.
Which leads us to our next question. Do we need to have this extended network and credentials to get into that role?
That for me, shall I just...
Correct.
So having credentials, well, actually, it depends on what we talk about credentials. In terms of qualification, there aren't really, I guess, recruiter qualifications. You can have a degree in HR. I don't actually have a degree in HR. I have I have a bachelor's and a master's in international relations, which is obviously nothing to do with that. I think as a recruiter, and there are online courses now, I think there was also a question around, what are the best online courses for this if I can remember. But you need to be, as a recruiter, you need to be able to explain what sets you apart. Typically companies, want to protect their brand, so they want to show that they want recruiters that can ensure, great candidate experience. That you can take a candidate, throughout the process in a smooth manner. Really, you need to talk about, your achievements, and your achievements, I think, are really sort of strong credentials. And what are the achievements as a recruiter? You could say, and you can have these listed on your CV, resume, even on your LinkedIn profile. Have sort of specific KPIs that you want to talk about, sort of key objectives that you've set yourself or that you've been set by your manager. This can be typically in recruitment, we use sort of the time to fill or time to hire. But I also feel conversion rates are actually very important. So, let's say if you're a sourcer, how long does it take you to find, 10 candidates? And from those 10 candidates, how many have then progressed throughout the process to, interview stage, final interview stage? Because that says on the quality of your work, not just the speed of your work. So those types of KPIs, of metrics, will be, your credentials as you progress in your career. Because if you have interviews for these jobs, I can assure you, you will be asked, what have been your achievements, and showing that you can talk about your KPIs shows that you're sort of very data-driven and very sort of objective and target-driven. And, as a recruiter, you also always work on expanding your network. You speak to candidates. I speak to candidates every day, which I really enjoy. And this is, progressively you keep on building your network. And this can also be used as credentials, right? Because you speak to people, people, and then when you have a role to fill, you think of someone from your network that could be good for this. I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything on that, Anina, on sort of credentials for designers.
I think there's a question about certifications for designer and crossing over, and I think I can just answer that question with relation to this one, because they're very similar. So when it comes to design, is like Rachel, when I started out in UX, there wasn't courses for UX, so I don't have the certification from a UX design school, as it didn't exist. I made use of my degree that I have studied, right? And I use transferable skills in my career to actually transform into UX design. And it's not necessarily a break, like you have to have a design degree, because it's not always about the degree that you have. It surely helps you to understand this person has some analytical skills and they've learned before. But whenever a designer wants a degree in human-centered design, which is still something very new, it's going to not be a lot of applicants for that role, right? Because degrees in human-centered design is something that came in really much later, and a lot of people are actually transferring from a current role into design. So they have different degrees, and we can't just say, oh, you did that degree, so you're not allowed into design. Not at all. Of course, I can recommend really good online courses and certification that you can get through Career Foundry, Interaction Design Foundation, Design Lab, Springboard, General Assembly, Google UX certification. Those are just the top ones that I could definitely recommend if you're interested in learning UX design. You feel you can't really learn it on yourself and you want a mentor or you want that guided education. There's enough courses that won't take you too long. You don't have to spend 3 or 4 years to get a degree and then start working. You can definitely do these part-time. It's more flexible so that you can still work and get some sort of education in terms of design, right? So those are the things that I would recommend. I don't think it's a deal breaker. But of course, you need to know design, right? If you educate yourself, that's fine, but make sure you understand the basics. And when a recruiter or a hiring manager is asking you questions, you have that academic background, even if you did it yourself, right? So I would say that is my advice. I'm not at all pro just a degree in design to be a designer. I don't think that is how design works and how we want you in a designer role. Yeah, Eri, you mentioned the Design Lab is quite good for a basis. I totally agree. That is quite a great suggestion. Oh, Lakshmi, you're on
hear
mute.
you, Lakshmi.
On mute between, so you don't hear a lot of background noise. So I have to remember to get back. So the next question, and I think, Anina, you've already touched on it. It talked about how do I get into this role for design as a junior? And you did mention about building your portfolio and doing things like that. Do you have any additional tips to add for people just getting into the field to continue to build their portfolio other than what you've shared?
Yeah, of course. I've actually written a checklist, a 10 checklist to build your portfolio on the Allora Collective. You can pop down the link in the chat. And that will really helps you to start building and thinking about your portfolio, writing those case studies out, because I think that's very daunting, right? That is really the first step that you want to take to start applying for roles. You can't look at roles and not have a portfolio. It's always going to be a portfolio that you have to attach to your roles. So please have a look at the portfolio checklist. That will really help you in just getting going. It's absolutely free on the Allora Collective website. And as you work with me as a client, we will then go through your case studies. We will do step by step. I'll review your case studies. We'll write it together. We'll also prep you to present your case study when you apply for a role. And then, of course, doing the interview with the assignments and everything. So definitely look at the portfolio checklist. And when you work with me, we'll be able to go through your entire portfolio and, of course, the interview process as well. Thanks, Kelly, for sharing the chat. There we go.
Thank you very much. Now, recently there's been a lot of press about remote in general, the challenges of being remote, but particularly in the context of designing and recruiting. This member of the audience wants to know what are some of those challenges. So I'll start with you, Rachel. What would be some of the challenges when you're trying to be a recruiter from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my experience has been, working internationally. So, recruiting candidates across various countries and relocating them into different countries sometimes. So I would say a challenge would be the time difference, irrespective of where you are. If your role, if a company that you're working for is quite flexible as to getting great talent from anywhere, the time difference can be a challenge because you have to speak to people sometimes a bit early in the morning, later at night. As a remote recruiter now, what I really enjoy is that I can, as I mentioned earlier in the introduction, I can plan my day however I want it. So I know that if one day I'll start having a call, quite early in the morning, maybe I'll finish later in the afternoon, or I'll take a break during the day. Or obviously I may start my day later if I know I'll have calls later in the day. I think, really, as a remote worker, you have to be organized. If you're not organized, if you're not sort of structured, it can be very easy to sort of lose track of everything. So, and including the time difference, because you really have to be strict on what time you're calling people, and that it works for them, that they're available, that your clients are also aware of what you're doing. So I would say, planning your day effectively, being autonomous, in your work is definitely key. And I would say it is a challenge because if you're not used to it, it is like getting used to, having a new habit, really. I noticed, when I was employed, I was, working and working closely with the team, with my manager. I was relying on them if I had questions. If I'm a remote worker, that's quite different. I felt I've had to rely on myself a lot more. I've had to be a lot more independent. Again, I talk about the time difference there. I have clients in Europe or in the US. Sometimes when I'm doing my work, they're not there. They're not online to answer questions. I just have to figure things out by myself. And this is actually what I really enjoy. But I know that for others, it can be a bit of a challenge, especially if you're new. If you're just still learning, grasping the world of recruitment, that can be quite tricky, actually. That's why I was saying, starting as a sourcer is also a good way because you get guided, really. So yeah, I would say time difference, being autonomous and planning your day effectively are challenges. that you can overcome by, being used to, getting used to that with time. Yeah. What about you, Anina?
Yeah, I think the two of the, I've just noted too that's really important, which I found for designers that's specifically for remote working is actually written communication. As a designer, getting into a role, you don't realize how much you have to write, and it's not just about writing things; it's about writing clearly and concisely. So if someone else is reading what you've written, they should be able to understand what you were saying, right? Because if you work asynchronously, meaning you work in different time zones, like Rachel said, there's already a could be a problem. If I read something and you're at sleep, I can't just go ping you and say, hey, Rachel, can you just clarify here? It should be clear already. So I think that is we assume like, yeah, I can write, so I can do this, but it's really about how you write. So if someone reads it, then exactly what you said. And in design, you have to document your work all the time. You have to write your results, your learnings, your insights, you're kind of defining your decisions that you've made as a designer, and without saying it, right? And so we might think it's easy, but I do think it could be an issue if you're not doing it clearly and concisely. But of course, it's something that we can all learn on. Writing is not rocket science. We can definitely start learning how to write. Working remotely definitely test those boundaries to improve. And you can always ask your colleagues. I'm not natively English, I'm sure you can hear. So when I'm writing and I'm struggling with something, I can pop to Kelly. I'm like, hey, Kelly, can you just review this? In my head, it sounds right, but it might not be as clear for a native speaking English person. So it's helped to, work with your colleagues. It's not embarrassing if you're not natively English. It's only American, in UK, that's really English. The rest of us speak different languages. So make use of that. There's also tools like the Hemingway app, which is amazing. I love that. And then Grammarly, which you can just add as an extension on your browser and will pick up issues for you. And I love that. So that's the one thing I would say. The second one would be actually being organized. You have to be self-reliant in a remote team. There's not going to be a manager over your shoulder checking that you're doing your work or following up where you've got struggles or what you need to do next. You actually have to document what you're working on today, what's the blockers, and reach out to solve those blockers to continue. You can't just wait for someone to solve problems for you. You have to be very much more proactive, and then sharing that with your team, right? Having one-on-ones with your manager, just to stay motivated, to make sure you're on the right track, you're still aligned, you don't work on your own island. So I think those are the two main ones from a design perspective, but easily overcome, right? You can easily improve those two struggle areas.
Agree, communication is critical at any time, and especially if you're, across the globe, talking to different people. I will stop for a second now to see, is there anybody that wants to come off chat or video? Please, by all means, participate. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lots of good information. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, obviously we're live, so it's the opportunity to ask us questions as well. Not just the ones that have been, submitted before the event, but if anyone has any questions, we're here. So happy to answer anything that's on anyone's mind.
Definitely. And let me know, because I will have to bring you put you into presenter mode to come off chat. So please drop us a line. We love to see you, love to hear you. Don't worry about, cats jumping, dogs jumping across. You may see my cat, so you never know.
We love pets.
Yeah, so just feel free. Don't worry about anything.
I'm not sure I love cats that much, but I don't mind seeing them. I'm more of a dog person. So.
Lorwanda does have a follow-up question. Besides the Hemingway app, are there any other apps or tools that you recommend? Other than, I know she mentioned Grammarly too. Are there any other tools you recommend?
I think the best way is to writing in like Google Documents, right? What you can do is, if you write in Google Document, there's this function where you can suggest and edit. So when you write a document and you give it to your colleague or a friend to review, then use that ability, because then you'll be able to see what you've written and then what the reviews were that was made. Because if someone just you write it and someone else improves it, you haven't learned anything, right? You can just read, it's like, oh, that sounds better. But with Google Docs, you can actually see the suggestions. You're like, oh, I shouldn't use is when I use are, right? So you start learning and you start writing better. So I definitely think speaking to someone that speaks natively English helps a lot. And Grammarly and Hemingway app is just an enhancement to that. and making sure that every time someone reviews it, you understand why they changed that. If they said, oh, they're changing this to a different word, it's like, okay, why is this a better word? Right? What is the grammar principles of this change? And then the next time you can build your own library, you know, that you said, okay, cool, and when I write this, I should use it in this tense, etc. And that would be a best way for you to learn that. Great question. I struggled with that a lot when I started out, and it's always going to be ongoing progress. I don't think if someone judges you based on your accents, for example, maybe that's not where you want to work, right? As long as you can clearly communicate. I find it as a positive because I write very plain English, because I don't have that vocabulary that makes me write things complex. I just don't have those words. So when someone reads my work, they will understand it because I don't use, you know, these fluffy, airy words. And that's great because you want anyone to read it, independent of their English level.
That's great information. And in fact, the next question kind of ties into it, because the question is for you, Rachel, which is, can I be an international recruiter if I only speak one language, English?
Well, English, definitely. Yeah. So the more languages you speak, the better. And I think, you know, if you speak a language, whether it's, say, Spanish, French, or German, or any language, can help position yourself in a particular way if you're looking to work with specific clients or specific countries or markets. But, you know, English is the language of business, as we say. So as long as you speak English, good enough English to present yourself well, whether you're a designer, whether you're a recruiter, to speak to clients, to speak to candidates, to explain things. Sometimes that may be quite technical, you know, you may be recruiting for an IT role, a tech role. As long as you speak good English, that is, I guess, that is the one requirement, I would say. So yeah, English as a minimum, definitely.
Thank you. And then the next question, I'm looking at it and you've sort of answered it, which is, how is communication different as a designer or recruiter when working with remote teams? However, I will stop now to see if there's anything else you want to add on that front, and also to see if we have any questions. But we do have a lot of fans of Grammarly in our audience, so including myself. Oh wait, I do have a question. Maybe we'll pivot to that. I'm in the process of putting together my first UX design portfolio after completing a course. Do you have any recommendations or standards in which the portfolio should be organized? So I guess that is for you, Anina.
Yeah, I love it. Well, congratulations of almost finishing your course. I know it's hard work, and especially if you have a job, it can get like sometimes demotivated, and especially during this time. So well done on almost completing your course. And now that means you have a case study which you can work with, which is great. I would definitely say, if you look at my checklist, I'm all about not starting with the output, not starting about how your portfolio will look like, not even designing it, not even looking for a website, just starting with your content, right? So what I will do is write a Google document and about the different sections that you would want to have in your portfolio. For example, I would always recommend have a little bio about yourself, right? You know, who are you, where you're from, why are you into design? Have a tagline, not just, hi, I'm a UX designer. That's not going to sell you. 100 other people is also going to say the same thing, right? So you have to have quite that differentiating, almost a tagline that separates you from other designers. So think about what it is that you add value into the UX community, because the company is looking how you can improve their products. So you want to state it that way as well. So think about a tagline. It should be quite personal. It should be focused on adding value as a designer for a company. If you're going to do the full-time employment, if it's freelance, of course, you've got a different audience, right? So write about yourself, a tagline, a little bio, then write about the experience that you have, and then you write about your case study, and that's the hardest job. I would say it will keep you busy for a long time, and making sure that the case study follows the UX design process that you've learned in your course, and adding the artifacts to that. So it's first starting with content, and putting it all out there. I don't like to have design portfolios that looks all the same. So I'm not going to tell you, have a testimonials part, have an about page, have a resume page, whatever. I'm not saying that. Definitely want to showcase your skills, you want to showcase your experience, your education, but there's different ways doing that, right? So I would definitely start a UX way. I always say this, you're going to UX your own UX portfolio, and exactly in that order. So have a look at the checklist. I think it will help you a lot. It really sets out not just what you need to do, but also the sequential steps of how to do this. Because I find a lot of designers get into designing the portfolio on the website and they lose track of the goal is not the website. The goal is what's on it, right? Is the content of it, and making sure that you understand what differentiates you from another student that also graduated on your course. So think a little about that. Please have a look at the website. It will definitely help you. Thank you so much, Christina.
We have another thank you, Laronda. This is for you, Rachel. You mentioned shadowing a recruiter for training. Is there a way to do that remotely, or the next best thing? What's the next best thing if you can't shadow this recruiter in person?
Yeah, I think nowadays, shadowing in person obviously can be tricky depending on where you are, with COVID and everyone, working remotely. I do think, and I do think there is a way to do that remotely. There's loads of interviews right now that only happen remotely. And I've seen that companies are more and more incorporating Teams or Zoom or whatever it is for their interviews. There is a way you can just participate in the interview. The other day, I was actually having a call with an recruitment agency, and they had someone on their side who was shadowing that recruitment consultant, and she was just there participating in a call, and it's perfectly fine to do that. Now I think people, there's that familiarity, we're used to having calls, not just one-on-one, but with several people within the audience. Most of the interviews that I schedule now for my clients, will have multiple stakeholders, multiple participants in these interviews. So the recruiter can just introduce you and say, hey, to the candidate and say, hey, Laronda will just be shadowing today. She won't be asking questions. She's just here to listen in, and that's perfectly fine. If you can't, the next best thing is, trying to do a call. If a video interview is not possible, you can ask a recruiter to sort of connect you on a call if they're just having a telephone call instead. Or you could maybe ask the recruiter if it's okay to record the call as long as the candidate is aware of that. That could be an alternative. Or you can also ask the recruiter to sort of do mock interview and get someone else, another colleague or a friend to participate, to act as a candidate, and you are the one listening in. Usually when you're getting to learn sort of the steps as a recruiter, or even if you're an experienced recruiter, you can follow a script in terms of, just understanding what is the flow of the interview, what do you start with, what are sort of the main questions that you ask, and how do you wrap up, how do you ask, questions on salary, on notice period, next steps, all of that. So I do think there's quite a few ways, working with teams, not teams from, I think, Microsoft, but just as a team with multiple people, trying to get the exposure that you need, whether it's by actually practicing or getting that sort of mock or practice interview for you to do. I hope that answers the question. We can't hear you, Lakshmi.
I mute. So I may keep it on, but I know I'll be creating background sounds for you. I think I've answered, hopefully I didn't miss somebody's question. Let me know if I'll come back to it. The next question is, which are the best websites to find a remote job as a junior UX designer?
Great question. I think that's one for me. But I think not just design. I think even if you're a recruiter, this website I'm going to mention is really focusing on remote, and you just have to do the search for a designer. But looking at We Work Remotely, they're solely focusing on remote roles. Malt.io. You can also, if you want to focus on specific groups or companies that's more diverse, you could look at job boards from Power to Fly, Career Contessa, Girls in Tech, Tech Ladies, Women Who Code. You can also search remote on LinkedIn to also find remote roles for designers as well. So there's a lot of job boards out there, but I think those are the main ones that will really help you finding remote roles, especially, and then of course also a lot of designer roles on those job boards.
Want to add, Rachel?
No, I can't think of anything or any other sort of websites to add. Obviously, Anina mentioned LinkedIn. I also wanted to highlight that you can search for jobs, but also you can search for hashtags. And this sometimes brings jobs that are not directly sort of listed there. So LinkedIn has an option for remote jobs, but there's also, remember that you can also search by hashtag. So hashtag, remote jobs, remote careers. So really trying to play around with that sort of functionality of searching on LinkedIn.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Rachel.
Okay. And correct me, but you don't have to be a premium member, correct, of LinkedIn to take advantage of searching for specific roles and job descriptions and getting yourself on their list?
Yeah, that's right. So you can just go on LinkedIn in the main search bar. You can just job title. You can say, UX designer, but you can also type hashtag UX designer, and different things will be coming up. Yeah,
that's such a great. No, that's great advice. Exactly. LinkedIn is so powerful, and I think we sometimes designers don't use LinkedIn because it's not creative enough, right? But we should definitely use LinkedIn even if you're in the creative field.
And especially for that, building that network piece, because you may see things about UX design and perhaps they're not creative, but there may be people sharing things that you think are interesting. You may want to connect with them, or you want to search. It's also helpful searching for company information. Also, if you want to build your CV, build your resume, or things like that, to look at other people's profiles. How do they describe themselves? How do they position themselves? This is actually part of the advice that we give as part of coaches at Allora Collective. When you want to, when you're searching on how to position yourself within your particular industry, doing that initial research is quite important, because it will help you target the right keywords that will also, attract the attention of an employer. I've talked about searching for companies, but you can also ask for referrals, ask for advice, and I'm a recruiter, so I'm not shy at reaching out to people on LinkedIn. And I think quite a few people are shy, but this is actually what LinkedIn is here about. That's what it's here for. Feel free to reach out to people and ask for advice, as long as you sort of position it with, the right purpose, really explain, what you're looking to get out of a conversation you want to have with someone. That will really help position yourself in a good way, and could even open quite a few other doors.
I admit I used to have this big fear of reaching out to people on LinkedIn. Then I pushed myself out of the comfort zone, and it's amazing how many people want to help. So if you just say, hey, I want 15 minutes of your time, it is amazing. So yes, it's the world out there. And don't forget Power to Fly. If you have an account, we partner with several companies. So there may be some remote roles in these areas that I do have two questions. Hopefully I'm not mispronouncing the name Clodag. But before I go there, would you like to and I think you posted some of the websites, Kelly, but would you like to kind of summarize for the audience how they can get a hold of you after this call? And then I'll go to the last two questions.
Yeah, I'll probably just summarize briefly and say that, Nina and I have been part of Allora Collective, and the purpose is really sort of helping people, obviously, if they need support with their portfolios for design, if they need help, relocating, finding jobs, but also if they just need, I guess, any help that's career related. Finding a job is probably the main one, but it can also be if you want advice on your CV or your resume, or if you just need to practice for an interview that you have coming up, or you have a couple of offers and you're not sure how to decide, how to ask the right questions to see if it's sort of the right fit for you and all of that. So we really have this, the advice that we provide is really structured on, how much time you need from us. So whether it's a free session that we actually offer to get to start with, or you can book an hour, you can book a month plan or a 3-month plan, whichever you think actually works best. So there's definitely quite a few services that we provide on the website. I think Kelly's just posted on that in the chat. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, on Instagram as well, and we're here to help. I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything, Anina, that perhaps I missed from that little blurb.
No, I think that was quite thorough. No, I think you nailed that. Thanks, Rachel. Then they can reach out to us anytime if they need more information.
Anina, this one's for you. Clodag, and please, if I mispronounced your name, but let me know. I've seen that HTML, CSS is included in most job descriptions. So what level of knowledge would you recommend for someone wanting to be a UX designer?
So that's twofold. If you're interested in HTML and CSS, go for it. It's just beneficial to you as a designer. You might not necessarily use it if you're not going to build prototypes in HTML and CSS. You might not use it, right? But it might be useful when you work with developers and you need to understand the styling of it, right? That's something you might build. If you're responsible for creating a design system, you need to have some basic understanding of CSS. HTML helps when you want to identify some things in the website, so you can use inspect tool and you understand how the HTML is looking. So answer basic level, right? You don't have to know this by writing it, blindly. You're not, unless you want to give a coder, it's not that vital. But having a basic understanding is definitely beneficial to your role as a designer and working and communicating with developers. And some roles require you to build prototypes in HTML and CSS. I would not recommend those because I feel that's a lot of time spent on building HTML and CSS prototype, where you can just use tools like InVision, Figma, Sketch, to do quick prototypes. But I would definitely say as a basic level of it would be a good benefit to your job spec. But it shouldn't be the main recommendation, because your role really as a UX designer is solving problems, right, and not implementing. If that's the coder's responsibility. Thank you, Clara, for that question. I think that's a really good question, and that comes up a lot with job specs becoming too wide, because sometimes they're not sure what to actually enter. There's just everything. So yeah, it's a good question.
And this one, although the question mentions UX designer, I think it could be relevant for both. So the question, and since so I'll continue with you, Anna, but I would like to hear your opinion as well, Rachel, which is, do you think there are opportunities to work remotely as a junior UX designer, or maybe it's a little more difficult now with COVID, then should be a little bit more easy than years before? So bottom line is, are there a lot of opportunities out there in your opinion?
I'm going to be brutally honest, right? I work with a lot of students. I also mentor at different institutions internationally. And yes, the market is saturated for designers, and especially junior designers, right? Because there's now the opportunity to do these courses is everywhere. So you have to stand out. So your portfolio is what's going to make you stand out. So as a junior designer, it's going to be hard, irrelevant of the industry you're in, right? Because you're junior, starting off with no experience. But in the design industry, you need to have a portfolio that shows that you can stand out from the rest. Secondly, if you apply for roles, set yourself up for success. Don't go apply for roles at startups and there's no other designers on the team. you'll burn out very quickly, you'll struggle, you might leave a bad impression to the founders or the small team that you work with, right? Or the developers you might not have that relationship with them yet to build up the skills to interact with them. Also, you might have a product manager, so it might be very hard for you to actually define requirements and know what's the roadmap. So make sure that if you apply for roles, look at roles that there's already a team of designers, and you can sell that easier to companies to say, you have the communication skills, you've worked remotely before with COVID, maybe in a different role, that's okay, that's transferable, right? So it's possible, it might be difficult, but with COVID, it has become easier. We actually work with a client that's a junior designer, and she got a really good job at a Berlin company, and it's remote, right? And she's done it. So it's definitely not impossible, but we worked with her, and she does have a really good portfolio that stands out. And now she's actually looking to transition to another amazing role. So it is possible, but you have to start with your portfolio and make sure that stands out from the other designers, and use your transferable skills that you have maybe in other roles, your communication and presentation when you go in for interviews would make that a bit easier for yourself. Thank you, Ari.
Rachel, applying that question to recruiters, what is your opinion of what the market is like out there for remote opportunities, and what will help us set ourselves apart as we go forward?
Yeah, I think it's interesting market. I think we were talking about this just yesterday with Anina and Kelly. So there is a pickup or recovery in the market, following, or as some markets now are starting to recover from the pandemic. Last year there was a lot of redundancies, layoffs, all of that. Now things are picking up again. Companies have adapted their strategy. I've noticed that therefore recruitment has picked up, and therefore quite a few jobs as recruiters have actually appeared on the markets. There's definitely a much bigger market. I've seen quite a few companies hiring for recruiters, definitely quite a bit in the US and Europe. I think here in the APAC region, I think Australia is probably hiring quite a bit, but the APAC region is otherwise hasn't caught up yet, I would say. So, and I have a friend, for instance, who is having quite a few interviews, in Germany, for instance. He can really sort of pick and choose. He told me he rejected an offer because he didn't feel it was the right fit. I think now, with, the effect of the pandemic, I do see that people are really thinking about, what is the right move for them. Not just about, I want to get a job, I want money. It's really around what would really be the right fit for me. I've also helped a few clients, on what is the right fit for them. How would that look like for them? Is it working remotely? Is it, people have their own preferences, and that's why the advice that we give at Allora Collective is, of course, very specific to individuals, to answering their particular needs. I do think there's, as I said, opportunities for recruiters, but as Anina said, for designers, it really also, depends on how you position yourself, how you communicate, how you present your work. As a recruiter, it's very much the same. How do you talk about your achievements? How do you ask the right questions in an interview to make sure that it's the right fit for you as an organization, that you'll be progressing, if that's what you want to do, that you'll be learning new skills. So I do see more of a reverse engineering now, where candidates want to ask more questions, ensuring that they'll be able to fit within a new organization.
You. And looks like we're coming up on the top of the hour, but I do want to stop and see if anyone has any questions, and you're still welcome to come off mute and onto our video.
Don't be shy. You want to work all want to work.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's good advice. Job search networking is key too. Introductions versus referrals. We've got plenty of free resources. What I would like to do, so you have given us so much to think about, and I really, really appreciate it. It's great information. What I like to do is when people walk out of here, they're probably processing all this and thinking, okay, now where do I begin? What do I start? So I will ask each one of you if you had 2 or 3 top tips that they can think about right away to begin organizing and moving forward towards the career of their dreams. What would that be, Rachel? And then I'll turn it over to Anina.
I was not expecting that question, but I would say taking a step back, reflecting on work that you have done, reflecting on what you also aspire to. And that can be just simply getting a spreadsheet out, a Google Doc, writing sort of your aspirations. It can be, it doesn't have to be in 5 years because, who knows what can happen in 5 years, but sort of, if you're looking for a change of job, if you're looking to build your portfolio, sort of writing is sort of first few steps, what do you aspire to, and trying to work through that, or reaching out to us to see, how can we guide you in that direction. If you want to work remotely, how can we help with that? And obviously the approach that we'll take will be, as I said, so obviously customized based on where you may want to work, what are your preferences in terms of working environments and so forth. I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything, Anina, to that.
Yeah, I think for a designer to get started, it's very overwhelming. If you're starting at the basic, I don't know why, but I always refer to a Word document, a Google document, but just start writing of where you want to be. What's your next step, right? If you're applying for a role, go to that job spec, put the link and the job spec in your document and go through it and see what skills do you already have, what don't you have, right? And start saying, cool, I have to improve maybe on basic HTML and CSS because I find that in most of the roles that I'm trying to apply for. And then you maybe say, okay, my next step is let's improve my HTML, CSS skills. If you have all those skills and you actually are ready to apply for this role but doesn't have yet a portfolio, your next step is let's build that portfolio, right? So just take it step by step, break things into smaller parts so it's more doable. Don't try to apply for jobs and do your portfolio and try to prepare for assignments and presentation and do a full-time job at the same time and job searching. Like that is just too much. Break it down into separate steps and then we work through that. So if you book a session with me, Rachel, Kelly, we'll definitely start at the beginning and then work through it with your pace and making sure that we achieve things, even if it's a small piece at a time. So by 6 months, by 3 months, we have accomplished quite a lot. It doesn't help trying to do everything at once. So definitely have a Word document, start writing out where I want to be, right? And then, okay, how can I get there? And you have to be quite specific about that. If it's about, okay, I first have to go buy a domain name, then that's part of your step because you have to get your credit card out and you have to go pay for it, right? Or you have to budget for it, whatever it is. Think about all those things. We sometimes overcommit and don't have enough time for what we think we would, and then we get demotivated to do this. And it's already a hectic process. Don't make it worse for yourself.
So much. And so I want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm very inspired. And then I also want to thank the audience for joining us and for all the lovely questions. So please follow Rachel, Anina, Kelly, Allora Collectives, and reach out to them if you're thinking of just career moves in general, and then particularly in the context of today's discussion. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah. Good evening. Enjoy it. Have a great one. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lakshmi.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.